So you guys are going to be creating a couple buildings, a sky and a ground in 2-point perspective. So in the previous exercise, you had 1 point, and now you guys are going to just up it to 2 point. So I just want to go over what perspective is, just very quick crash course. So in perspective, you are using a horizon line, and that means just like when you look out into the horizon, you have a line that separates the sky and the ground. So it might be the ocean and the sky, or like earth and sky. So that's the horizon line, and on that horizon line lie the vanishing points. That's where everything vanishes towards, gives the illusion of depth. So previously we had 1 point, and that's like as if you're looking straight down a street. This is 2 point, where you're kind of looking to the left and the right. So here is the first point, and here is the second point. Okay, so the vanishing points lay on the horizon line. So I just want to talk to you guys about how to get to this point, and then how to use the tools to maneuver the grid around. So what you're going to do is start a new document. This is just practice, so you can just call it perspective practice. And it can just be letter size. I would have it be horizontal, working in perspective. If it didn't pop up, remember you can always grab your artboard tool and just change the orientation. Okay, so there is a tool here. I think we've already introduced ourselves to it, the perspective grid tool, and along with it, you're going to be using the perspective selection tool to throw anything into perspective, right? Like you did before. Same with 2 point. Okay, now if your grid's still popping up as 1 point, all you have to do is go up to view, down to perspective grid, and then you have 1, 2, and 3 point perspective. We're working with 2. Okay, so if I were to say I want to change to 1, that's what we had before. And now you're going to view, perspective, and switching to 2 point, and then hit 2P, normal view. Okay, so now you have this additional color, orange. So orange, blue, and green. And that widget, that bring that on over, you can see that behind the toolbar. So remind yourself that when you are in the perspective tool or the perspective selection tool, Shift P for grid, Shift V for select, you can activate and maneuver around this widget, right? So light blue means you're not active. You can draw things flat. Dark blue, left side, orange, right side, green, bottom or top. Okay, so let's just do a few buildings and do the sky and the ground together. And in the next exercise, you're going to go over some more like tips and tricks to do things like making a sidewalk, making an awning, things like that. We'll throw some buildings in here. Some windows on the building. Okay, so a few layers. Let's name one layer buildings. Let's name one layer sky, another layer ground, and let's do windows, doors, that last layer. And that, I have this as the bottom layer. It really should be the top because we want it to sit on top of the buildings. All right. Okay. So the first thing to know about the grid after you've got your layers is you can maneuver it by hitting Shift P or going to your grid tool, and now you see that it's active, right? So you have the ability to move this around. Like I can click down here and I can bring this on down. So imagine this is easy to see, this is like the building sitting on the ground. So imagine that this would be kind of where your street or sidewalk might be. So you're kind of, at this point, you're looking down a little bit more. It's like a little bit more of a bird's eye view. If I were to move this up and move this up, you're seeing more of a worm's eye view, right? So here's the ground. So you're seeing more of the ground space. You can also move the horizon line even more farther up. All right, so what that would do is that means that from the horizon line up here down would be ground, and from the horizon line to the top, that amount of space would be sky. So that changes the composition, changes the look, right? And so same if I move the horizon line down. Okay. So, I mean, you don't want to get too crazy, as you guys are just most likely learning about this tool. So I recommend, you know, the sky is a little bit more than the ground. And I like the vanishing points to be a little farther away, just to kind of give more realistic feel, not so crunched and smashed up. Okay, so let's make our first building. So layers are out. You can draw in perspective or you can make it flat and then drag it over. We'll do both. So let's just draw in perspective. Let's do building 1. So I'm gonna go ahead and activate that layer. I'm going to grab my shape tool, clicking on M. I'm just gonna make this a pink building. You can choose whatever color you want and no stroke. And I wanna be in the blue. Okay, so just because this is here, obviously it doesn't mean that's where you're able to draw. So I can draw up here and I can bring it farther down. But I do like to follow, at least for the bottom, especially as beginners, I like to follow where I set this so that my buildings all kind of sit on this one vanishing line, looks realistic. Because if you have another building starting down here, right, it looks like it's not set, it's not settled. And you can always move that by hitting Shift V and then moving that up to that line, right? But so what I'm trying to say is I just follow the bottom lines here, right? Unless you're trying to get fancy, you really understand what you're doing. Okay, so that's my left side. I'm going to switch over to the orange, back to my M, and you're going to make sure that as best you can, you kind of start from the top, and you can tell when you connect, that white square pops up. So I'm not going to make my building too deep. I'm just going to let it stop there. Now I want a different color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to color guide, and then it has shades. It's nice. So I can choose a shade light or dark, whatever you'd like. So what I'm saying by clicking on the star, because I'm saying the light's coming from here. So just to be aware that everything on the right side would be a bit darker, whatever shade you choose. Okay, so back to Shift V. So anything in perspective that you need to select, move around, needs to be used with this tool, perspective selection tool, or it won't correspond. And I'm just bringing it down till it locks in with the bottom. Okay, so that's building 1. Let's do one more building just for this practice exercise. Same layer, back to the rectangle. I'm gonna do one over here, so I'm gonna stay in the orange. Choose a different color for this guy. Again, you guys can choose your own color for practice here. All right, so drawing another side of another building. Be taller, light, smaller, whatever you'd like to do. But again, I'm following right where that bottom line is. And then switching over to the blue. So even though I'm on this orange side, you know, visually we can see that. We're drawing the right side, we're drawing the left side of the building, and that corresponds to blue. Just like this is the right side, and that corresponds to orange. So again, locking in, and how'd this guy go? A little bit skinny. Okay, back to color guide while that's selected, and pick like a lighter orange since the light's coming from there. Okay, Shift V. There you go. Okay. So we have some buildings. Let's get our sky and ground. This is pretty simple. Go ahead and activate that layer. Tell your grid that you're not active because your sky and ground is always just flat. So maybe your ground is brown, maybe it's gray because it's cement. You know, I'm making an urban scene with you guys, so I'm going to go with like a light gray to start, like an asphalt kind of view. All right, and remember you can go beyond the artboard, especially print. Hopefully you guys get to print these. So going beyond the artboard makes a nice like bleed section. So that's the ground. And then just activate, choose a color. You can always change it. I'm going to choose a family of color and then go to the color guide and grab a nice sky color from there. Remember, you can always make a gradient. That's something you can do for the actual project. All right. And then lastly, let's talk about doing some windows and doors and how to make that kind of a quick thing. Staying with a deactivated perspective grid, going to our layers. Getting that layer, stay in the rectangle shape tool. So I'm just going to draw some rectangles. You can make them squares, whatever you'd like to do. And we can make these gradients if you want to get fancy. They're going to be windows, so I'm going to choose a color that looks like the lights are on. Or maybe you can choose a color like the sun's reflecting. Okay, to the regular selection tool, and then we're going to make a copy. So you hit Alt Option, and you click and drag. I'm going to just do that a few times. And then I'm going to select by highlighting overall, Alt Option, and make a copy of those three. Use the smart guides to help you. And then again, highlight overall. Doing your best to kind of line that up. Okay, so you could go to town and make a bunch. This is probably enough because you can make copies when you're in the grid. So I'm going to just select over all of these and tell them they're grouped. So that's Command G. And they just can live over here, right? They can always be here. So instead of taking them and turning these into perspective with the perspective selection tool, I'm going to leave them. And I'm going to make a copy of them. So there's one that I'm going to always have. Here's this guy. Go to Shift V, so not perspective, but V as in the selection tool. With that selected, I'm going to click on the right side or the orange first and put some windows on the orange building. So here we go. There's some right there, and I can just, while I'm in there, Alt Option, and it will automatically make copy and put it in perspective for me. Okay, so I can do the same thing on the pink building, blue, grab these guys, hit Alt Option so they don't go anywhere. And there you are. And you can do the same thing with a door. But this is all you guys need to do. Turn it in, view, perspective grid, hide, take a screenshot, and make sure you have your layers shown.